Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Sam Bates. I'm with the Market Intelligence team here at OpenMinds. And today, as part of our Circle Elite Executive Roundtable series, we have OpenMinds Senior Associate Ken Carr, who will be discussing how to design a variable compensation program. Ken brings over 30 years of finance, technology, data analysis, and reporting experience in the health and human service field to OpenMinds. He currently serves as Senior Associate with the OpenMinds consulting practice. In this role, Mr. Carr serves as a subject matter expert where he has led numerous engagements in strategic planning, merger and acquisition prospecting, business process improvement, managed care and value-based contracting preparedness, financial analysis of service lines, and technology selection. Now, before we get started today, we have a couple of brief housekeeping reminders. First, while you are muted during today's briefing, we are interested in any questions that you might have. Please feel free to submit those in the question box, and Ken will have time at the end to answer them. Secondly, as a reminder, the recording and PowerPoint from today's presentation will be available tomorrow on the OpenMinds website. And without further ado, I will leave you with Ken.
Thank you very much, Sam, and welcome to everyone who is able to join us this afternoon to look at designing a performance-based compensation model. So today, what we want to do is cover 3 or 4 aspects of an organization putting together a performance-based approach. First, we want to just talk a bit about how performance-based incentives are one piece of your overall comprehensive employment strategy. So we just want to get an idea of the big picture of which really impacting our market right now, and how this is one way of approaching that retention challenge. Secondly, we want to dig into the nuts and bolts of how do you design a performance compensation system, both by starting with your goals and identifying those, and then building out that compensation system in a way that you're able to drive new revenue, utilize a portion of that revenue then to supplement compensation through incentives. So we want to look at kind of the nuts and bolts of that, and then talk a bit about how you're going to monitor moving forward, monitoring that you're really achieving the goals that you want to as you put your incentive system in place. And as Sam said, as you have questions, please put them in the box. Sam will let me know when there are questions, and we will be sure at the end to make sure we answer those questions. So with that, just want to really talk a little bit about what's driving the employment market in our health and human services right now. Doing a lot of strategy work with organizations, and one of the concerns that I hear around sustainability is, will we be able to retain staff moving into the future? How will we be able to recruit staff? Because a number of organizations I talk with have a large percentage of their positions open right now. And so, you know, there's some key drivers around that we need to be thinking about as we recruit, but in particular, even as we try to retain staff through compensation and other methods. You know, the competencies needed, even at the executive level. So as we talk about performance compensation and we look at a model today, we're going to really look at that clinical side of doing a performance system, incentive system. But remember that as we identify different roles within the organization, the finance department, the marketing department, there may be and should be a number of performance measures that can be tied to incentive compensation. So, you know, and we know that the competencies that are needed in our executive team, in our marketing team, with our IT staff, with our financial staff, those are changing. And so this is really an opportunity to try to strengthen our ability to hold on to staff. Often compensation isn't the only factor that keeps a person in an organization. It can be that basic factor. But remember also, as we talk about incentive compensation, we want to engage people in our mission and in the quality results of our organization. So we'll talk a bit about that as well. Just thinking about the market overall, the challenges that we face, and in terms of performance incentive systems, creating some sort of a competitive advantage as you step forward to recruit and retain your staff. Baby boomers are expected to completely be out of the workforce by 2030. That's just less than 9 years away. And I live in Florida. I heard the statistic 2 days ago. I was at a meeting where it's anticipated 54% of the population of Florida will be retired by the year 2030. So, that has a couple of aspects to it for us. One being that, finding qualified workers is going to get more challenging, but also the ability to change how we employ folks, maybe employing that gig economy and bringing folks in a different way, maybe retired folks who want to work 2 days a week but not full time. So it really changes aspects of our employment market. When we look in terms of executive staff and clinical salaries as well, it is difficult to keep up with what others are paying, whether that's with direct service staff or executive salaries. And one of the ways that we can address that is by taking a step back, looking at the key drivers of revenue in our organization, if we're fee for service, or if we have opportunity for pay for performance or some other types of value-driven outcomes, be able to pull that revenue in so that we can be more competitive with those salaries at different levels within our organization. So just some things to think about. Now, Open Minds has done a lot of thinking in terms of optimizing the workforce. How do we recruit better? How do we drive performance, and how do we retain staff? We've identified a number of strategies, and just want to touch upon those strategies. This is one key strategy out of 7 that we think organizations should consider in a comprehensive approach to being an employer of choice, being able to optimize performance and hold on to staff and maximize your ability to continue to be sustainable in this market. A couple of these strategies are related to compensation. The strategy number 1 is really related to determining how or where you can pay more, how you can adjust your service portfolio a bit, looking at which services there may be opportunity to grow and grow revenue, and which services may, because of how they are set up, how they're provided, maybe the use of evidence-based practices, may actually be generating an excess, and your ability to identify those services, maximize those, can give you opportunity to take some of that excess and distribute it back to staff and increase compensation. So strategy 1 is all about that. There may be situations, I've talked to providers recently who, just because of how tight things are post-COVID, are looking at about closing down certain programs because of the need to drive their core programs. And so, consolidating the revenue that they have to drive those services and pay those staff what's necessary to keep the positions open. That strategy 1 is really about, how do you pay more? How can you adapt your service portfolio? The thing we want to talk about today is this performance-based approach. So how can you do some gain sharing perhaps? How can you tie into value-based reimbursement opportunities? We're also going to really be looking at a fee-for-service approach and how you can begin building even with fee-for-service, but designing that system to maximize revenue, have that revenue feed into your margin and then turn that back into compensation, but doing so by incentivizing the outcomes that are important to the organization. There are efficiency strategies, helping staff work at the top of their license, or perhaps using technology to improve productivity, to automate tasks, maybe to eliminate the need for certain staff so that you have more resources that can be distributed to the staff that are of the greatest need to actually deliver services. So some efficiency strategies, and then even thinking in terms of engagement strategies. How do you build engagement overall? And remember, compensation and having an incentive compensation-based system is one part of your strategy overall, but along with that, you're going to need to determine how do we create engagement, how do we become that employer of choice, how do we provide a career ladder to help provide training for staff. All of those things come into play, becoming a employer of choice, as well as even tapping into volunteers. So this is one of 7 strategies that we think are important for organizations to consider. So as we look at a performance-based compensation system, I want to consider 3 key questions. First is, how do you identify the performance goals that align with your growth strategy and your long-term sustainability? So, a performance system only focused on utilization is probably going to miss the mark. You need to make sure that you are aligning your system around your overall growth and what drives your culture, what your culture is about. Sometimes a system can be set up that incentivizes revenue over quality. And so we want to talk a little bit about that question of how do you identify those goals. Second thing is, how do you engage and incentivize staff in achieving those performance goals? And so setting up, crafting the nuts and bolts of an effective system, and even tweaking that as you learn certain aspects of what's successful with it, what might be driving results that you don't want to achieve. So how do you really engage and incentivize those specific performance goals with a system that works well? And the last thing is, how do you monitor your success? How do you know that you are really achieving the goals that you want and tracking the right data? Richard Branson, the quote here, your employees are your company's real competitive advantage. They're the ones that making things happen. So long as their needs are being met. We want to talk about that as well, and how performance incentives can play into that. So just thinking in terms of planning to optimize your talent, think about the goals first of all. So if you want to set up a performance compensation system, what are your goals overall? And I think there are 4 areas that you need to be thinking about. First is aligning with your strategy objectives. It starts with a performance culture. I talked with an executive director earlier this week that had stepped into an organization that wasn't real data driven, doing great work, but they didn't have the data to demonstrate that. And that was a major issue, because if you're doing really good results, but you can't talk to payers about that, that's a challenge. And so, how do you create a performance-driven culture that not only does the good work, but captures the data as well, becomes very data-driven? So aligning your strategy with those objectives. And you can't do an effective compensation incentive system unless you have really good data around utilization, but also data around those goals that you've set for quality and outcomes. Staff motivation, how do you really focus staff not just on earning money, but on driving those quality results, tying those 2 things together. So you're actually motivating staff not just about earning more, but about driving those quality results. And then planned financial outcomes. So what's your target profit? And you kind of have to back into an incentive-based system, but start with some idea of, if you have a 2% margin right now, or a 5%, and if you were to implement this plan, model it out, how much could you add to your margin that you could turn around to fund the system? And so you have to step through from that area of identifying potential revenue margin to pulling that back. So your ability to really do some planned financial outcomes and projections becomes key. So aligning with your strategy objectives. Secondly, promoting staff satisfaction and engagement. When you put an incentive plan together, staff are going to be looking at a couple of things. One is it equitable, and is it fair? So is it equitable in terms of the effort that I put in related to the effort that others are being put in? Do I feel like, yeah, this is an equitable system compared to all the other clinicians, for instance, that might be on that plan as well. And is it fair? Do I feel like the company is taking advantage of me, or do I feel like the organization truly is trying to increase my compensation and I am partnering with them? It's a fair approach because now I am a partner in driving more revenue. Because I drive more revenue, I can share in those results. I think a good system also identifies those hungry employees. Now, not every employee is hungry or driven to earn more money, to really maximize the amount of their compensation, but some are. Might depend on where someone is at in their career, might depend upon personal factors, it might be dependent upon personality. And you need a system that allows those hungry employees to really be able to perform well, within some caps, of course, and we'll look at that, an approach for that. In your compensation system, you need to make sure that you're considering compliance with payer and legal requirements. There may be some contractual compliance issues. You want to make sure that you're monitoring documentation and coding. You're monitoring those outcomes. You're ensuring that staff are being honest in terms of how they're documenting things and driven around the right outcomes. And remembering that there may be some legal requirements as well. And I always recommend, as you put something like this together, to really check with your attorney and confirm, does this make sense? To get some outside input in terms of making sure that you're meeting all the legal requirements in your state. And then the last area, financial stability and growth. Is this truly going to drive financial results? What are those revenue drivers? Because to do a really good performance incentive system, you need to know for each type of service, what are the key drivers of revenue? You always start with the drivers, figure out how you can improve those drivers to increase revenue. And then shares financial outcomes. And so this is all about driving revenue so you have a margin that you can then turn around and share with staff. Mentioned a moment ago, this whole concept of aligning the organizational goals with staff motivations. Of course, you have a good sense for what your goals are. If you're going to set up a performance incentive plan, you want to make sure that you maintain your values, that staff, if you have a value around quality services, putting the consumer first, you want to make sure that that incentive system is going to align with those values. You're going to want to achieve your revenue goals. You're going to provide flexibility to address unexpected events along the way. So as you model things out, there may be things that happen that you may have to adapt your compensation model. And so you kind of step it in, you pilot it, you figure out what types of changes might need to happen. But you always start with a bit of flexibility, some caps, maybe some floors, so that you don't create unintended consequences in terms of compensation. And then ensuring a transparent process. So for instance, if staff are monitored based upon the number of hours, direct service hours spent with consumers, they're able to see that documentation coming to them on a daily and weekly basis. They're able to assess, yes, that makes sense. Yeah, I saw this number of consumers, this number of hours look right. So really ensuring a very transparent process so that folks buy in and see it as both equitable and fair. And then in terms of staff motivation, so thinking on the other side from the staff perspective, if you want this incentive compensation system to be effective, you need to think of their motivation. So they want security. They want to make sure they have sufficient income. And we'll look at, for instance, a model where there's a great deal of risk for staff. That type of model is not going to check the box of security on the part of staff. Staff want self-esteem. They really want to be able to perform in addition to earning income, have some recognition. And so as you think in terms of performance incentives, think even beyond just compensation to recognition, different forms of recognition within the organization. And so self-esteem becomes important. Fairness we talked about, and then flexibility, and staff want some flexibility as well. If they are truly paid on a basis of just how many direct service hours that they perform in any given week or month, and they take a week or two off, that's going to create some issues for them. Or they need to take some time off related to a health issue. And so having some flexibility to work with the system is going to be important from a staff member's perspective. Now, one of the things we continually need to think about is, go back 5 years, 6 years ago, when most of our revenue was fee for service, we were truly looking at productivity. The number of direct service hours provided, some very clear productivity numbers that drove revenue. Now that we're moving into more and more value-based reimbursement, we need to rethink what some of those value measures are. How do some of our value-based agreements drive revenue, and how can we align staff activity around those outcomes to drive that revenue? So, an example would be, that first step into value when we're looking at fee for service with some sort of a pay for performance incentive as well. A number of typical examples of this I've seen, for instance, reduced ER use, reduced admissions, and so you can reduce a certain number of those in the contract. You can demonstrate that. You might, at the end of a period of time, be able to earn additional revenue related to that. So you're working with the payer, you're getting some pay for performance. Another typical one that I've seen would be 7-day HEDIS follow-up or the 30-day HEDIS follow-up. Sometimes those are tied to pay for performance. It's an easy thing for the payer to be able to track. We know that it tends to, drive down readmissions. And so if you're in a pay for performance contract like that, you're going to really, if you can align the incentives of staff with making sure those 7-day HEDIS measures are occurring, and you're going to earn revenue, your incentive becomes giving some of that compensation back to those key staff. And so, pay for performance, fee for service with a performance incentive bonus is a real great way to begin to step into creating a performance incentive program. You're focusing on proactive responsiveness on the part of staff, maybe some flexible scheduling that they're taking on in order to hit those results. You may be really depending on some interpersonal skills that are being rewarded in terms of their consumer interactions. So those are all key aspects. Another example would be organizations that have moved into case rates and bundled rates. Here, quite often, so you're going to have a set rate, and in a case rate or a bundled rate situation, often you're looking at trying to reduce costs because you know that your rate is set. Now, you may be able to serve more individuals with a bundled rate and increase revenue overall, but for the most part, if you're working with a population of folks, your goal is to identify those highest needs consumers, get them into the right interventions sooner so that you reduce the overall cost of service. And so often when you're working with that type of a program and you want to link into incentives, you're looking at putting some clinical decision support tools in place that staff can use to become more efficient, to reduce the cost of services by addressing needs sooner, getting people into the most appropriate level of service through assessments. And so, and even developing community relationships so that you're able to pass off individuals to care and do better care coordination. So often with case rates, bundle rates, you're really looking at the efficiency of service, making sure that costs are minimized by providing the right service at the right time. That also applies to more of a capitated type of arrangement where you're getting a per member per month amount, maybe over a large population. Maybe you're serving for a particular payer all of their members with SMI in your 5-county area. And so you've got really a set amount of revenue, but now your challenge is to help staff and give them the tools to be as efficient as possible in terms of assessment, in terms of referral to the right service at the right time, and the best clinical support tools so that you reduce costs, which creates margin that you can then turn into some compensation. So let's transition and talk a little bit about creating a performance compensation system. And after looking at that last slide, as you can imagine, there are multiple different approaches one can take. And it all starts with identifying what are your goals, how do you earn your revenue, what is your revenue driver for a particular service, how can you drive more revenue, or reduce costs that you create margin and put that back. But what we want to look at is building a type of system based mostly on utilization with some focus also on quality. There are often, we refer to 3 different compensation types of models. Fixed salary is what we're all familiar with. That is no performance incentive at all. Often we're looking what's the market rate. People get paid that market rate, and the risk to the employee is very low. However, the results for the employer can be low as well. We then moved a step forward, and we have something of a combined approach of a fixed salary with the ability to earn a bonus. So the risk increases for the employee because now they may not earn enough or as much as they could if they're not hitting whatever those incentive goals are. For the employer, the results can increase because now you're tying compensation to results. And then the last form, and we don't see this as often, but some organizations do have it, and some organizations in our market might have it as well, just pure productivity. It would be similar to an independent consultant that earns their money based upon whatever they deliver, however many hours of service they're delivering for your organization. And so the risk is very high that if the time isn't put in to deliver the services, then the employee or the independent contractor isn't going to get paid. But the results are very high because now this is a pure productivity type of approach. With that fixed salary model, of course, you're going to have reliable income. We're very familiar with that. From a finance standpoint, it's really easy to work with because it's very concrete information. You don't have to do a lot of forecasting around it. There's no ability, though, however, to drive the results. We think of in terms of equitable and fair. Often staff don't see the fixed model as equitable and fair because we often end up with our longer term employees earning the most revenue, even though they may not even be the best performers. And so revenue is really based upon, and the amount of income that you earn is based more on longevity than it is on performance. And the challenge, and HR staff know this, the challenge is for performers just need to be pushed out of the organization. So, we're looking at salary surveys, a compensation system with multiple tiers, annual reviews. You're familiar because this is how most of us have done compensation up to a point of beginning to put performance incentives in place. The base plus an incentive approach, or the bonus model, it does begin to shift that risk onto the employee, and it requires a shift in culture. So as you think about implementing a performance incentive plan, the communication has to start early. The rationale has to start early. communicating to staff how they become partners in driving profitability that can end up being returned to them. So there is this shift in culture that's tied to education. So really marketing the plan to staff early on becomes important. The other thing to consider is that you should be looking at both productivity and quality goals. The best systems that I've seen out there really do tie in. They look at productivity because that's key, and often, especially if we have contracts that are still tied to fee for service, that's how we're going to drive more revenue. However, we need to make sure we're not incentivizing productivity at the cost of quality. And so thinking in terms of how you also work in both quality results and also consumer satisfaction. And so creating a kind of a three-legged approach to how are you driving some results that are comprehensive and have a positive impact, not just on revenue, but on consumer services. Risk of the organization, the challenge of creating a performance-based culture, balancing productivity, quality, results, and employee satisfaction. We talked about what's in it for the employee. Implementing accurate real-time information reporting. So that whole transparency piece. So if you're not able to get data easily from your financial system, often it's a matter of pulling data out of your payroll system and your EHR and combining that so that staff can have an idea of where they at any given day, so that they're falling behind in a particular week towards their compensation goal, they know where they're at and they're able to make adjustments. But if you can't give them some real-time data or next day data, you may have a challenge selling this to staff, and then projecting the results, managing cash flow, making sure there aren't unintended results related to the impact on your revenue. So, and then the pure productivity model, it's the most complex model to plan and execute because you're really your revenue is going to depend upon the productivity of the staff. And so it's very hard to project that. You may try to project that based upon an average, but you really don't know. The goal is enhanced productivity and results. The culture, you're really looking at a particular culture of people who are driven, those hungry employees. And there's a planning and monitoring that's needed around those unintended results, even more than that hybrid model that we talked about last. You can end up with overutilization of services because staff are really driven to drive revenue. You can end up with a poorer customer service, consumer services, missed opportunities for service because staff, all their compensation is focused on driving revenue. And so those risks are the same as the hybrid model, but they're actually intensified. So let's talk a little bit about measuring productivity. Any of you who have an outpatient clinic have worked with this type of model, I'm sure, where you're really looking at just fixed units. And this is an easy way, if you have an outpatient-based clinic, of identifying, gosh, how do we understand and measure productivity of staff, and then utilize that to maybe drive some incentives. And so you're familiar with the productivity estimator, where you're looking at 2,080 hours is what a staff person would put in, a full-time person in a year, and you can subtract out the non-productive hours around holidays and PTO and team meetings and documentation. You can, for your organization, kind of identify what those end up being. In this particular example, looking at a productivity figure of about 68%. Organizations I've worked with, as I've looked at a lot of different models, they range anywhere from 60% to 70%, kind of being on that high side. If one is looking at a 75%, you're really beginning to put some stress on staff to be very, very productive. So it's often that 60 to 65, 68% range. And I have seen organizations where the staff productivity, when we've run the numbers, have been down into the 50s. And so for your organization, kind of estimating what's a reasonable amount, tying that into how many clients do we serve, what's the average number of service hours per client, and coming up with client hours, so you can kind of back into what staff are needed, and then work with that. If you feel that 65% is the productivity figure that you can kind of break even with, then setting up an incentive program around, if a person is at 66%, maybe they get a certain amount of revenue, because with your model, now we're looking at 68% here, maybe we say that that's where our break even is at. And so at 60, if you're 69% productive or 70%, you begin to build a tiered system where staff can begin to share in that additional revenue that you know you're earning beyond your basic costs for the staff, the number of clients that you serve. So you're really driving productivity, you're driving the services to additional staff. But we also know that not all time is the same. And so a number of organizations have taken an approach of using relative value units. Some of you may be familiar with them. We see them more in hospital systems or physical health. But there are a number of RVUs that are associated with behavioral health as well. And I know providers where they've got certain services where there isn't a CMS, relative value unit. They've done their own calculations to kind of figure out what would be an equivalency. So a relative value unit says that some services require more time, some services require more mental effort and judgment, an assessment, versus maybe a routine outpatient visit with a low intensity client, right? So we want to be able to reward those services that require more mental effort, more intensity, maybe more risk to the consumer. And so CMS with psychiatrists, to put these RVUs together. Each service has a RVU, which is kind of a weighted effort, and so those can be utilized to put together a system. For instance, here are some RVUs that are pulled based upon procedure code. Psychiatric diagnostic evaluation, RVU is 3. Well, we know that that's going to take both more time and more mental effort, more responsibility. However, individual therapy for 30 minutes, that's going to be about 1.5 RVUs. We drop down to an outpatient office visit with low intensity with an established client. That's only going to be 0.97, just under 1 RVU. And so as a staff member, as I'm seeing clients and I'm accepting clients, I'm also monitoring how many RVUs am I developing. Because if I have the opportunity to do more diagnostic assessments because they're needed, even though they may be more work, then I may want to build those into my schedule. So this RVU approach recognizes more than just how many hours of time I'm putting in. A couple of RVU examples. So if you were to begin to build the nuts and bolts of a system. So here's a system that I've seen organizations use before that have taken the RVU approach, especially kind of in that outpatient clinical model. One approach in that hybrid model would be to say, let's say that for a particular clinician, the base salary, the average market salary is maybe $95,000. I may want to offer my clinicians a base salary of $80,000, but in order to really drive some incentive, say, in addition to that $80,000, for every RVU that you complete, I will give you $5. And so how that plays out, and I will settle up with you on a quarterly basis. And so we're going to be showing you on a weekly basis how many RVUs you're generating at the end of month 1, month 2, month 3, and then you'll be able to estimate as you move along, what's my salary going to be? And I'll settle up with you maybe by the middle of the month following each quarter. And annually, let's say the employee, in addition to their base salary of $80,000, they can be earning about putting in about 200 encounters, which end up being maybe 5,000 RVUs during the year. Then you're able to begin to break that down. Total compensation, so I'm putting in as an employee 5,000 RVUs at a reimbursement of $5 per RVU. My compensation actually goes up to 105. So even though my base salary is 80, I'm really working hard. I'm providing those most valued services. I'm filling my schedule with them. And I'm earning a compensation that's $10,000 greater than the market. On a pure productivity approach, we might say your base salary is 0, but if for every RVU that you provide and document, we're going to give you $21. And so in that situation, and as I look at this, actually, in this situation, we're really looking at driving $21 to get at that 105. That 105. So, under the hybrid approach, it's 80,000 plus 5,000 times $5, and under the full pure productivity, we're looking at 5,000 times the 21. So once again, you could see though the risk of a pure productivity approach driving the wrong goals. The other thing I would say is that one of the concerns I've seen as organizations put incentive plans in place is too much focus on the individual. I think that there is really value in promoting teamwork, especially when we move into value-based care, the ability to be sharing information among a team or even across teams and across service lines. And so as you put together a compensation system, you may want to look beyond just the individual. Maybe in the example we looked at, an individual, maybe you're not earning as much per RVU, but for your team overall, maybe there are some quality goals as well that are set for your team that are driving a portion of that compensation. So setting productivity targets by the team and then tying those incentives to team performance may fit your culture a lot better than the individual-driven approach. It's going to promote teamwork. It's going to ensure accountability among the team. It's going to create a pool of dollars that then can be distributed. And you're going to kind of take that base salary, and then everyone is going to work together and share information, push each other to have the best results, to get the best team compensation that's then, that pool is distributed. The other thing that I would say about this is that looking at those quality goals. So, if we look at that base, maybe people are earning revenue based upon our RVU as well. I've seen organizations say, but we're going to hold back an additional, you're going to have the opportunity to earn an additional $5,000. So you build that into your financial projections. And that's all going to be related to customer satisfaction. So every person that you see is going to get a text customer service questionnaire, and the more of those that are filled out, and the better rating on a scale of 1 to 5 you get, is also going to drive a part of that $5,000 pool that we're going to set aside specifically around customer service. You may have a pool that's set aside around some specific goals and targets. Maybe an employee is, part productivity based, but there are some pay for performance goals in your contract around seeing individuals within 7 days, and so a part of your compensation is going to be paid. So you can see how you can begin to build some complexity around having multiple goals in addition to just productivity. The key piece of this is having some really solid financial modeling. Model out what are those revenue drivers? What do you think the revenue could be? What would be the implication? And then have a ceiling and having a floor in place, and having an ability to be adjusting periodically. That being a part of the expectation, especially as you begin to get into building your model. Monitoring performance goals. Once again, we want those goals to be tied to performance related to our strategy and performance related to our operations. Those are really those two key areas. And so we want to tie our compensation incentives back to those. Secondly, we want to do staff-focused reporting. If staff are now being held accountable and their compensation is tied to their results and outcomes, we need to be getting good, accurate data to them on a timely basis, timely being now, at any point that they want to pull it, or at least next day. Thinking in terms of metrics, once again, we focused in this discussion about clinical staff, but you want to be thinking in terms of all of the metrics that drive your success. At Open Minds, we talk about portfolio strength, and so what are we doing to monitor our portfolio of services, our consumer strength? So how are we monitoring consumer results, customer satisfaction, our value-based strength? So what's going to tie to those contracts? Our marketing, and in particular our marketing staff, setting up incentives around some of those key marketing results that we're going to drive. Financial strength that would tie to our leadership and maybe even our management, supervisory staff. And then even setting up, I've seen organizations set up incentives around innovation as well. And so there may be a pool of innovation money that folks can earn as well if they identify an innovation that saves money or drives new opportunity. Once again, at Open Minds, we talk a lot about these. These are some examples, and you'll get copies of these slides, but your ability to look at each of these performance areas. At Open Minds, we look at these 5 when we assess an organization. How successful are you with the consumer, and how are you going to measure it? Via the Net Promoter Score, via customer satisfaction score. You're going to do some mystery shopping and tie that into the incentive. So these are examples of being clinically cutting edge, driving financial sustainability around profitability, around driving revenue. Understanding your unit cost, maybe tying some incentives into that as well, or the HEDIS measures we talked about earlier. So with that, I wanted to reserve about 10 minutes. We have about 10 minutes to answer any questions that came in, and want to give you an opportunity. I know that Sam has been monitoring some of those questions, and we want to just take some time to address those.
Again, great. Also, as a quick side note, looks like we lost your video. Not a big deal if you can't get it back, but just as an FYI.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay.
No worries.
I don't know where that video went, but I will see if I can get.
There it is.
Is it back?
Yes,
okay,
sir.
Great. Okay, great.
Okay, perfect. Here is the first question. Are there any national benchmark averages for medical provider billable time against scheduled time? For example, should patient-facing billable time average 50%, 75%, 85%, et cetera?
Yeah, and I don't know of any official benchmarks, but what I've seen overall is somewhere in that 60 to 65% range. I've seen some organizations push up to 68. I've actually seen organizations go as high as 70, and I would be really concerned about driving 70 unless there was some way of that driving revenue and giving that back to staff as an incentive. I'd say 50% is on the low side. If I were setting a target, and I don't have an official benchmark to refer to, but I'd say somewhere around that 65% seems to have a balance in terms of staff satisfaction overall and trying to drive revenue. And of course, that's always a factor of, you know, how stable, how good are your rates as well. But I think if you can be aiming that 65% range, you're probably in line with a lot of organizations.
Gotcha. Perfect. And the second part of that question is, do you think there are any differences in expectations for MD level versus NP level?
For doctors versus nurse practitioners, is that kind of?
I believe so.
Yeah. In terms of those expectations, I don't have a really solid answer for that. I think it's probably how you are staffed. I think that from my perspective, when we talk about staffing strategy and compensation, I would like my most highly paid individuals to be as productive as possible. And so in my experience, as I've worked as a CFO and worked with clinics, I tend to see a real focus on nurse practitioners hitting those marks in particular, because that's a costly employee to have, and we want to make sure that we can cover that cost and have some cushion in there. Same with MDs, although sometimes there are those other medical director responsibilities. But I think for those higher paid staff in particular, ensuring that compensation, that percentage of billable hours is high enough is going to be really key to the financial stability of the program.
Gotcha. That makes sense. And that's a good segue into the next one, I think. So when you're implementing and rolling out a program like this, is this something where you'd start with a small group first and then work it onto a larger group? And if so, which group do you start with? How do you assess that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And, I'm a finance person, and I love innovation, and I love financial models, but I always like taking a very slow step in, piloting something before I roll it out. I think there's a lot of risk if you were to put together a model, maybe based upon what another organization was doing, and you just roll that out, to all of your clinicians across all of your service lines. The way I would approach it, one, I would do a lot of modeling, and when we talk about value, when we talk about competitive advantage in the market we're in, I do think every organization should have a really good financial analyst that can build financial models. But I would start by building that model and even taking a look at some of what we looked at in this presentation. Build the model, and then I would identify probably one team in one service line. Talk with them, get their engagement to be the test group, the test team, and start slow, and build that out. Take a quarter, see what the results are, adapt for the next quarter. I would probably take at least a couple quarters to build that. Maybe after I really felt that was moving well, move that to the other teams in a particular service line. If there's another service line that has different revenue drivers, then I could at the same time be figuring out, well, how could we roll it out to that service line? So I wouldn't roll it out to everyone at one time. I think the risk to the organization is really high. I might even consider doing some shadow pay. So we're going to work with you and enable you to work with this compensation system. And if you can earn the additional compensation based upon this hybrid model we're putting in place, you could earn that, but you're not going to make any less than you're making now. And so you kind of do this shadow revenue approach, so that for that pilot group, for that first quarter or two, they really aren't taking on any risk whatsoever. And then you move them into the fully implemented process. But it gives you an opportunity to understand and know that performance incentive system is going to work for you, and it doesn't put a lot of risk on staff initially, which creates greater engagement for them, which you can build upon to build that performance culture and roll it out to others. That's how I would approach it.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. And then when that program is fully rolled out, who all can this affect? Is it just people who are affecting those performance metrics, or I know you're talking about the team aspect, could that get extended to maybe back office employees, or who all do you think this could affect?
Yeah, and I think every organization is a little bit different, but I think that that's one of those initial factors for your organization to consider. Do you really want to just drive performance with those key staff that drive revenue, or do you really want to tie this in a little more comprehensively? For instance, you have front desk staff, and how they treat consumers when they come in, their efficiency at getting really good data into the EHR when a new consumer starts to receive services. I mean, that's important for the whole process. So, if you were to want to include more staff than just clinicians, that's where I think the team approach could come in. So, who's a part of that bigger treatment team, even though they're not the clinician giving the direct service. And so you might want to create a performance system that's team based, so that the front desk staff are able to share in that, because they play a key role in that consumer satisfaction as well. Now, they may be rewarded differently, but it may come out of that entire pool that clinicians are working together with the team to develop.
Yeah, I remember reading about how the dental industry started including incentives for the front desk staff when they got re-rolled and follow-up visits, and all of a sudden, follow-up visits skyrocketed. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of creative solutions to getting everybody on board.
And when you think about it, a lot of how we feel about going to see, a counselor, a clinician, or even going to the dentist, a lot of that starts the moment I step in, right? Am I greeted?
Yep.
Are my needs tended to? And even in the dental area, the person cleaning your teeth, the dental hygienist, spends more time with you than even the dentist. And so how can everyone in the team? And I think that there's great strategy in taking that team approach and divvying things out that way.
Absolutely. And it looks like we have time for one more question here. When you were talking about providing, up to date, maybe day after feedback, what are the potential solutions for that? Is that accessible in your current EHR? Is there additional software? What all could that look like?
Yeah. I think a lot of it has to do with your entire data system. You're going to be capturing data. So this data, and especially using the example of the clinician incentive compensation, but even tying in the front desk staff, a lot of that's going to come out of your EHR. And so I think it has to do with how well you've developed your EHR, how well you're able to get data out. Do you have maybe integrated business intelligence in your EHR that you can create the ability for staff to be seeing that data immediately? Do you take that data and dump it each day into a data warehouse and staff can access it through a different dashboard? Depending on your approach, I think the key will be however you get your data and analyze it and get it out to staff, you want to make sure that you have an aspect of that data that's related directly to this incentive compensation, the outcomes that are tied to that. So staff can really be monitoring performance daily.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today. Thanks, Ken, so much for your time. And thanks everyone for joining. Ken, I think if you want to click to the next couple slides, we have a couple quick promos. First, there's additional resources. If you found today's information helpful, here are some related links. And then secondly, next week, it's not too late to register for the Technology and Analytics Institute. We're going to be having it in Las Vegas. Here are some of the speakers that we'll be having and some of the displays on, or exhibits on display. I don't know, Ken, if you have a couple words about TIE that you might want to share.
It'll be a great experience. Always enjoy TIE. It's going to be in Las Vegas starting on Monday. We have a couple of really great seminars, and then just a number of great topics. As you can see, we like to understand what's happening at that payer level and how that impacts our movement into value and how we can use technology that way. So it will be action-packed, a lot of great opportunities to learn more and figure out how you can use technology for your competitive advantage.
Yeah, and I think there's going to be at least 2 sessions that are virtual, and I think there might be more recorded. So if you can't make it in person, definitely check out to see what all the options are. And then we have one more slide, Ken, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you very much. And then join us the week after that, November 4th, and we're going to have Sarah Elliott, and she's going to be talking about the future of long-term care, looking at all the alternative models of practice and what's on the forefront of coming up next. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks again, Ken, so much for your time and energy. Thanks everyone for showing up. As a quick reminder, the recording and slides from today's presentation will be available tomorrow on the Open Minds website. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Sam.